Welcome back to the Coach Momentum podcast with Karen Capello. I want to start today with something that may feel a little unexpected when you first hear it, especially if you've been working to become a masterful coach. There's a time that your conversations can be going very well, and at the same time, your business isn't moving forward. And what I've seen is that for many coaches, what's happening isn't that something is missing in the conversation. It's that the conversation is too complete. So let me explain what I mean. You're having thoughtful conversations, you're present, you're asking good questions, you're helping the other person see things more clearly. And by the end of the conversation, they feel better. They've had insight, they feel supported, they feel like something shifted. And then the conversation ends. There's no next step, no movement forward. And it can feel confusing because the conversation was good. In fact, it was more than good. And that's the point. I remember working with a coach who was having exactly this experience. People consistently told her how helpful her conversations were. They appreciated her thinking. They enjoyed speaking with her. And they'd often say things like, "This gave me a lot to think about." And that was it. When we looked more closely at what was happening, what became clear is that her conversations were reaching a natural conclusion and no decision was being made. She was using all of her coaching skills and she was completing the conversation. There was no space left for anything else to happen. There was no moment where someone could consider continuing the work because in a very real way, the conversation had already delivered something complete. So we looked at how she could lead the discovery conversation to stay open. Where was there still something unresolved or something at stake? Or where was a decision present even if it hadn't been spoken about? And while what shifted wasn't dramatic, it did change things. She stopped trying to complete the conversation. She began to recognize when the conversation was approaching a point where something could move forward, and she stayed with it. She allowed the other person to see that there was more available, that continuing the conversation would matter. And from there, her conversation began to lead to results, to clients, to contracts, because she stopped closing the conversation too early. This is something I want you to really notice in your own conversations. There's a point where insight happens, and there's a point where a decision becomes possible, and those are not the same point. Many coaching conversations are designed to create insight. And in your business, insight on its own is not what creates a contract. A contract is created when someone sees that continuing the work matters. And that only becomes visible if the conversation reaches that point. This is really important for the leaders you're here to serve. They're used to having thoughtful conversations. They have access to insight. What they're looking for is movement and results. They're looking for clarity that leads to a decision. And when your conversation stays in a place that feels complete, they leave with something valuable and no reason to continue. So if you've been having really good conversations and nothing is quite moving forward, I want to invite you to look at this in a different way. Where are your conversations ending in a place that feels complete? And where might there be more available that isn't being explored? Where are you moving toward closure instead of staying with what matters? Because those moments, those small moments, are where your business is built. By allowing your conversations to reach the point where something can actually move. So as you move through the next few conversations, notice this. Where does the conversation feel like it's wrapping up? And what would happen if you stayed there just a little longer and asked a deeper question to see what's actually there? Because that's often where the next step becomes clear. And that's where conversations begin to lead somewhere. I'll see you in the next episode. Meantime, wishing you success with ease and joy.